If you enjoy stories about unfaithful husbands, this channel is for you. Leave a like and support us by subscribing to the channel. I'm 72 years old now, and I need to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. At 67, I left my husband after 40 years of marriage. Not 40 months, 40 years. It was the hardest decision I ever made. It was also the best. I know what you're thinking. You're doing the math right now, wondering what kind of woman walks away at that age. You're thinking I must be selfish, or unstable, or having some kind of late-life crisis. Maybe you think I'm one of those women who throws away a perfectly good marriage because she watched too many afternoon talk shows. I've heard it all. My own sister didn't speak to me for 8 months. Several friends stopped calling. One neighbor, a woman I'd known for 20 years, told me I should be ashamed, that women our age don't just give up on their commitments. But here's what nobody asks. What took me so long? That's the real question, isn't it? Not why I left, but why I stayed. Why I woke up next to a stranger for 14,000 mornings. Why I kept serving dinner to a man who barely looked up from his plate. Why I celebrated anniversaries that felt like attending my own funeral. I'm not here to make excuses or ask for sympathy. I'm 72 years old, too old for that nonsense. I'm here because maybe someone needs to hear this. Maybe there's another woman sitting in her quiet house right now, wondering if this hollow ache is really all there is. It's not. But to understand why I finally left, you need to understand what I was leaving, and why it looked so perfect from the outside. From the outside, my marriage looked solid, stable, even enviable. We had a nice house in a quiet neighborhood in Minneapolis, Minnesota. 2 healthy daughters who grew up to be successful women. No scandals, no police calls, no screaming matches that made the neighbors whisper. We went to block parties. We smiled in holiday photos. We looked like we had it figured out. My husband, Daniel, was respected at his insurance company. Reliable, punctual. The kind of man who shoveled the driveway every winter morning and never missed a mortgage payment. People called him dependable, and they meant it as a compliment. I was the good wife. I kept the house spotless, raised the girls, volunteered at their schools. I learned to make his mother's pot roast exactly how he liked it. I laughed at his stories at neighborhood gatherings, even when I'd heard them dozens of times before. We looked fine, but inside that house I was suffocating. It wasn't one big thing. There was no dramatic moment I could point to and say, that's when it broke. It was 1,000 small things, accumulating like snow that never melts, just gets heavier. The way he'd make decisions without consulting me. The way he'd talk over me at dinner parties, correcting my stories. The way he'd sit in his recliner every evening, absorbed in sports channels or his tablet, while I moved through the rooms like furniture. I started having this recurring thought around my 58th birthday. I'd be doing something ordinary, folding his shirts, scraping dishes, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m, and I'd think, is this it? Is this all I get? The first time I let myself imagine leaving, something strange happened. I took a full breath for the first time in years. That terrified me more than staying ever had. People always ask why I stayed so long. The answer isn't simple, but I'll try. I married Daniel when I was 27. That felt late back then, 1978. Most of my friends had already been married for years, some with toddlers running around. I was starting to worry I'd missed my window. Daniel seemed like the safe choice. He had a steady job at Midwest Insurance, ambition, a plan for the future. He didn't drink heavily or gamble. He held doors open for me. My parents adored him immediately. He's solid, Helen, my father said, shaking Daniel's hand at our engagement dinner. He'll provide for you. My mother nodded with relief. You're fortunate. So many girls your age are still chasing fantasies. I thought I was being mature, practical. I'd watched enough friends marry for passion only to end up divorced and struggling by 30. I told myself that stability mattered more than butterflies, that respect would deepen into love. Maybe it did, for a while. Or maybe I just got good at lying to myself. We had a small wedding at St. Mark's, bought a modest split level in Edina. I got pregnant with our first daughter, Jessica, within a year. Then Emily came 2 years later. I threw myself into motherhood with relief. It gave me purpose, identity, something that felt like mine. The girls needed me in a way Daniel never did. When I held them, I felt seen. Daniel was an adequate father. He provided, attended school concerts, didn't abandon us. But he was distant, even with them. Present in body, absent in spirit. I told myself this was marriage, that it wasn't supposed to feel like the movies. My mother had endured worse and never complained, so I stayed quiet too. But staying quiet doesn't mean you stop screaming inside. The problems in our marriage weren't the kind you see in movies. There was no yelling, no broken dishes, no dramatic exits at midnight. It was quieter than that, and somehow worse. Daniel never hit me, never called me names, never gambled away our savings or came home drunk. By most standards, he was a decent husband, but he made me invisible. I remember one evening when Emily was about 6. I was telling Daniel about a conversation I'd had with her teacher, something important about Emily struggling with reading. He was reading the newspaper. I kept talking. His eyes never left the page. "Daniel, are you listening?" "So you agree we should get her a tutor who specializes in interpretive dance?" "Sounds good." I stopped talking. He never noticed. Every major decision was his. Where we lived, what car we bought, how we spent money, where we went on vacation. If I suggested something different, he'd use that patient tone, the one you use with children who don't understand how the world works. "That's not realistic, Helen. We need to be practical. Let's not get carried away." When Emily started kindergarten and I mentioned taking some college courses, I'd always wanted to finish my degree in art history. He actually laughed. "Art history? Helen, you're 34 years old with 2 kids. What would you even do with that?" The way he said it made me feel ridiculous. Childish. Selfish for even wanting something for myself. So I stopped wanting. I watched my mother live this way. She died never having finished a single thing she started for herself. I told myself I was being noble. I didn't realize I was rehearsing for my own disappearance. After the girls were born, I stopped being Helen, the woman who'd once spent Saturday afternoons at art museums and dreamed of studying Renaissance paintings in Florence. I became Mom. Then later, just Daniel's wife. The transformation happened so gradually I didn't notice until it was complete. I cut my hair into a practical bob, because long hair got in the way when the girls were small. I stopped wearing the vintage earrings I used to hunt for at estate sales. They weren't appropriate for a mother. I packed away my art books to make room for toy bins and school supplies. One small erasure at a time, I disappeared. Daniel never seemed to notice. Or maybe he preferred this version, the one who didn't have inconvenient dreams or take up too much space. Our conversations became purely functional. "Did you call the plumber? Jessica needs new shoes. Your mother wants us for Thanksgiving." We stopped touching, except by accident in the hallway. I remember one specific Tuesday. I was 43. I'd spent all day preparing his favorite meal, pot roast with those little potatoes he liked, green beans the way his mother made them, apple pie from scratch. He came home, ate in silence while scrolling through his phone, then said, "Tastes fine," and went to watch the game. I'd spent 6 hours cooking. He'd spent 6 seconds acknowledging it. I stood at the sink washing dishes and realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at me, really looked at me, with anything resembling interest or desire, or even basic curiosity about who I was. I was 43 years old, and I'd become wallpaper in my own life. That night, I cried in the shower where no one could hear. It wouldn't be the last time. By our 35th anniversary, Daniel and I had perfected the performance of marriage while abandoning the reality of it. We had our routines down to a science. He woke at 5:30, made coffee, left for the office by 7. I'd hear the garage door close and feel my shoulders relax. 8 hours where I didn't have to pretend. Evenings were predictable as clockwork. He'd come home at 6:15, grunt something that might have been a greeting, flip through the mail without opening it. I'd serve dinner. We'd eat while he checked his phone constantly. Work emails, he always said. Then he'd retreat to the den, and I'd clean up. Some weeks we'd exchange fewer than 100 words total, but the real loneliness hit during our 40th anniversary dinner. Daniel took me to Giuseppe's, the same Italian restaurant where he'd proposed 40 years earlier. I'd hoped maybe he'd chosen it for sentimental reasons, that maybe he'd remember who we used to be. He ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. At the next table, an older couple was laughing, their heads close together, sharing a dessert with 2 forks. The woman touched her husband's hand, and he smiled at her like she'd just said something wonderful. I looked across at Daniel. He was answering work emails. "Daniel," I said quietly, "can you put the phone away? Just for tonight?" He looked up, irritated. "Helen, this is important. Jenkins needs these numbers. It's our anniversary, and we're here, aren't we?" He went back to typing. I excused myself to the restroom and cried in a stall for 10 minutes. When I came back, he hadn't noticed I'd been gone. That night, I understood with terrible clarity. I was married to someone who'd rather answer emails than talk to me, and I'd been accepting that for 40 years. I don't remember the exact moment I decided I couldn't do this anymore. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was erosion. 40 years of water wearing down stone until there was nothing left but a hole. I was 66 years old, folding Daniel's laundry on a Wednesday afternoon, when the thought came clearly. I could leave. I could actually leave. The thought didn't feel liberating. It felt terrifying. I had no income of my own. I'd stopped working when Jessica was born and never went back. Everything, the house, the cars, the bank accounts, had both our names, but Daniel controlled all of it. He paid every bill, made every investment, decided what we could afford. I didn't even know the passwords to our accounts. What would I live on? My Social Security wouldn't cover a studio apartment in Minneapolis. I had no recent work history, no resume, no marketable skills. I was 66 years old. Who hires a 66-year-old woman who hasn't worked in nearly 40 years? And then there was everyone else. My sister Barbara would be furious. She'd stayed in her own unhappy marriage for 52 years. She'd see my leaving as a judgment on her choices. My daughters would be confused, maybe ashamed. They'd grown up thinking we had a good marriage. What would they tell their friends? Their husbands? The church ladies would whisper. The neighbors would gossip. Friends would have to choose sides. Poor Daniel, everyone would say, after everything he did for her, after 40 years. So I stayed another day, then another week, another month. I became an expert at negotiating with fear. Just wait until after Christmas. Just wait until Emily's promotion. Just wait until Daniel retires. There was always a reason to wait, but something had shifted. Once I'd admitted I wanted to leave, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The question wasn't if anymore, it was when, and then life answered for me. Diane died on a Thursday in March. She was my closest friend. We'd met 30 years ago when our daughters were in the same Girl Scout troop. She was 68, healthy, active. She did water aerobics at the Y and had just booked a cruise to Alaska for her 70th birthday. She had a stroke in her kitchen while making lunch, gone before the paramedics arrived. I stood at her funeral in a packed church, listening to her son talk about all the things Diane had planned to do, the quilting class she'd signed up for, the garden she wanted to plant, the memoir she'd mentioned writing someday. Someday. That word echoed in my head like a warning bell. After the service, I sat in my car in the church parking lot for an hour, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. Diane thought she had time. We all think we have time. When I got home, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked. I was 66 years old. My face showed every year. When had I gotten so old? More importantly, when had I started living like I was already dead? 2 days later, my friend Ruth came over. We'd known each other for 18 years. Her husband worked with Daniel at Midwest Insurance. We sat in my kitchen drinking tea, both of us still raw from Diane's funeral. Ruth set down her cup and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Helen, I need to tell you something. I've been struggling with whether to say anything for months, but after Diane..." She took a breath. "I can't stay quiet anymore." My stomach dropped. "Daniel is having an affair." The words didn't make sense. I actually laughed. "That's ridiculous. You're mistaken." "I'm not." Ruth pulled out her phone. "I saw them together. Multiple times. I took photos because I knew you wouldn't believe me." She showed me. Daniel, with a woman I didn't recognize. His hand on her lower back outside a restaurant. Kissing her in a parking lot. Getting into a hotel together. The photos were dated over the past 4 months. "Helen," Ruth said quietly, "this has been going on for at least 14 years. Maybe longer." I didn't confront Daniel that night, or the next day. I sat with the information like sitting with a ticking bomb, waiting to see if I'd explode or go numb. 14 years, maybe longer. While I'd been disappearing, being the good wife, making his meals, keeping his house, shrinking myself smaller and smaller, he'd been living an entire separate life. The affair explained everything. His distance, his disinterest, the late meetings that multiplied over the years, the business trips that seemed excessive, the way he'd stopped even pretending to see me. He hadn't just neglected me, he'd replaced me. Ruth had given me everything. Hotel receipts going back years, more photos, even the woman's name. Vanessa Clark. She was 51, worked as a paralegal at Henderson & Associates downtown, divorced, no children. I looked her up online. She was attractive, put together, smiled confidently in her professional headshot. the kind of woman who looked like she'd never erased herself for anyone. When I finally confronted Daniel, I waited until Saturday morning, made his coffee, set it in front of him with Ruth's folder. "I know about Vanessa," I said calmly. "I know everything." His face went white. He opened the folder, closed it. "Helen, let me explain. 14 years, Daniel. Ruth has proof going back 14 years. He tried to minimize it first, said it wasn't serious, that Vanessa was just someone he talked to, that it didn't mean anything. When I showed him the hotel receipts, he changed tactics, said I'd neglected him first, that I'd stopped trying years ago, that he'd been lonely. I listened without crying, without screaming. When he finished, I said, "I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." His face changed. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 40 years over this?" "You threw it away, Daniel. 14 years ago. I'm just finally admitting it's gone." The divorce took 13 months. Daniel fought me on everything. The house, his pension, the retirement accounts, even my car. He wanted me to settle quickly, quietly, take far less than I deserved and disappear. My attorney was a sharp woman named Andrea Moss, who'd been through her own divorce at 55. "He had a 14-year affair," she said, reviewing Ruth's evidence. "We're getting you everything you're legally entitled to. Every penny." And she did. I moved into my own apartment 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I was 68 years old. It was small, just one bedroom, a galley kitchen, a tiny balcony overlooking Lake Calhoun. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every single decision about what went on the walls. Some friends disappeared. Barbara didn't speak to me for 8 months. She finally called to tell me I was selfish, that I'd humiliated Daniel, that women our age should know better than to blow up their lives over ancient history. But my daughters surprised me. Emily came to help me unpack. As we hung curtains in my bedroom, she said quietly, "Mom, I need to tell you something. Growing up, I thought marriage meant what you and Dad had. Distance, silence, parallel lives." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I almost married someone exactly like Dad. Watching you leave, it woke me up. It showed me I didn't have to accept that." I cried then. The kind of crying that empties you out and fills you back up at the same time. The divorce settlement was fair, half of everything, including Daniel's pension and retirement accounts. Andrea made absolutely certain of that. I wasn't wealthy, but I could breathe financially. Daniel tried to come back 7 months later. He showed up at my apartment on a Sunday morning, unannounced. Vanessa had left him, he said. He'd made a terrible mistake. We'd been together 40 years. Didn't that count for something? Couldn't we try again? I looked at him standing in my doorway, this man I'd spent most of my life with, and felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, not even pity. Just nothing. "No, Daniel," I said calmly. "I'm done." He started to argue. I closed the door. At 69, I went on my first date in over 40 years. At 70, I took a watercolor class. At 71, I finally went to Italy, Florence, just like I'd dreamed when I was 25. I'm 72 now. My apartment is filled with mediocre paintings I made myself. I have lunch with friends who actually listen when I talk. My daughters visit often, and we have real conversations, the kind where we're honest about our lives, our mistakes, our hopes. Is my life perfect? No. Am I sometimes lonely? Yes. Do I worry about money occasionally? Of course, but I'm alive. If you're reading this and thinking it's too late, for you, for change, for choosing yourself, I'm here to tell you it's not. My only regret isn't that I left. It's that I didn't leave sooner. Thank you for watching until the end. Your support is very important. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.